Welcome to Make It Happen with Will Polston. I'm Will Polston. This is episode number 31, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about my theory of light. You're either going to think I'm crazy or maybe even a genius in what I'm about to share with you. And I'm very aware that I'm going to have some critics and about what I'm going to share with you today. And there's definitely more questions for me to answer about specific parts, which I simply haven't uncovered yet. But I'm willing to risk you thinking that I'm crazy and the critique that may come with this episode, because I truly think the basis of this could be what we really need to know in the mainstream in the future, where it can be further proven and refined. But for years now, I have delved deep into learning everything that I feel can enable me and other people to grow for the better. And hopefully, if you've been listening to some of these podcast episodes, that has been something you've benefited from. And mostly that's been personal development related, and I specifically have an obsession with mindset, as no doubt you know, and I've learned from many of the personal development new age greats like Tony Robbins and other people along those lines. But slowly and surely I found myself getting more and more drawn into understanding things at a scientific level, whether it's physics, quantum physics, metaphysics, or a spiritual level. And I say spiritual and scientific because I believe that they're actually the same. And into sort of the 21st century where we're at, a lot of science is being able to catch up with what people have called spirituality for a very long time. But about 2 years ago, I had what I refer to as a bit of a crazy idea about what light could possibly be. And I have a lot of very odd abstract thoughts. A lot of them I don't share, as most people would quite simply think I'm nuts. But this particular thought wasn't stimulated by anything that I had read at the time. It was just, like I say, a crazy thought that popped into my mind. And last year, in my perception, I'd had a particularly challenging year, and I had to dig really, really deeper than ever before in certain points to ensure that I kept progressing. And what this led me to do was push my learning intensity to new levels and consider completely new paradigms. And recently, last year, I'd read something which helped confirm some of this thinking around this crazy idea that I had. And at the time, when I first had this thought, I had only shared it with a few people. And now I thought it's about time I put this out on a podcast so other people can maybe explore about it. So my crazy idea was, what if light is knowledge? And when I say knowledge, I'm going to sort of use other terms as knowledge. So it could be information, consciousness, intelligence, and I'm going to keep referring to that. And what if we as human beings are some sort of super advanced receiver and transmitter of that information? Now, before I go into explain that in a little bit more detail, my theory in more detail, 4 big questions that philosophers have been attempting to answer for centuries are: who are we? Where do we come from? Why are we here? And where are we going? And what I'm about to share, I think, might help to answer some of those questions, even if it maybe is just opening up another way of thinking for you that you haven't considered before. But if I'm really honest, that's not the purpose of this podcast. It's certainly not to answer those questions. It's just sharing a bit of this idea. Now, what I do want to say is I'm not religious, and anything that you listen to and you hear me say is not intended to cause any internal conflict to those that are religious. It's all just my opinion. But for millennium, religious texts have spoken about light. I mean, the Bible states, God said the famous words, "Let there be light." And of course, there's variations of that as well. I mean, the original Latinization of the Greek translation used in the Vetus Latina is lux sit, which can be translated as light, let it exist, or let light exist. In the Latin Vulgate Bible, the Hebrew phrase is translated in Latin as fiat lux, which means let light be made. And religion also refers to prophets. And a prophet is an individual who's regarded as being in contact with a divine being and is said to speak on that entity's behalf, serving as an intermediary with humanity by delivering messages or teachings from the supernatural, quote unquote, source to other people. And thanks to science, we understand that natural light is emitted from the sun, and the sun is continuously beaming its light. In addition, we also understand that light is energy. And the first law of thermodynamics, also known as the law of conservation of energy, states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Energy can only be transferred or changed from one form or another. Now, we also refer to God as being God as omnipotent, all powerful, omnibenevolent, all good, all loving, and omniscient, all knowing. Now, one could argue that regardless of a scientific or religious belief, that everything you would ever want or need to know is available to you if that was the case. So what's this got to do with light? And let's take the scientific angle. Light is energy, specifically only energy visible to the human eye. But as per my crazy idea is, what if it isn't just the thing that enables us to see? So what if light is actually knowledge or information or consciousness or intelligence? Now, if you think about it, we've made unconscious links to light and knowledge or information, unconsciousness, intelligence for years. So when we say that someone is intellectually smart, we call them bright. If they're intellectually not smart, we call them dim. When someone is clever or achieves something of particular perceived greatness, then we call them a star. When you're in a state of gratitude, you say, I feel light. If I'm feeling light. So when you have sort of past guilt, or you're feeling particularly fearful of the future, then you'll say, I'm in a dark place. When you ask someone to enlighten you, they're providing you with more knowledge or information or consciousness or intelligence. And when we call someone a light worker, it's normally due to their ability to share knowledge, again, information, consciousness, intelligence, to help people progress. So now back to the science bit. A radio transmits electromagnetic waves, and when one radio tunes into another radio, it receives that information. Now consider this. Our sun is transmitting light. A world-famous physicist called Freeman Dyson was quoted in 1993 to say, "No universe with intelligence is pointless. Intelligence could persist for eternity, perhaps in the form of a cloud of charged particles of light through shrewd conservation of energy." So therefore, what if knowledge or information, consciousness, intelligence was somehow a cloud of charged particles of light? This would mean that all the knowledge we ever need is constantly around us, and we just haven't had the ability to tune into it yet. That is until you understand that we're also light, and how that enables you to be able to access the information. So again, coming back to science, your body appears to be a solid thing. But if you break it down into its different systems, like the skeleton system, the muscular system, the nervous system, and break those down, you end up with organs like your heart, your brain, your lungs. Break those down, there's tissues. Break those down, there's cells. Break those cells down, you end up with molecules. Break those down, you have atoms. And break atoms down, then you have subatomic particles. Quantum physics allows us to know that subatomic particles are waves. So therefore, your body is actually, in its purest form, electromagnetic waves. Now, more specifically, you're made up of light waves. So therefore, you're light. You might think you're this meat suit, but actually, you're light. Now, if we go back to religion, and think back to religion for a second, wise beings were always painted with halos around their heads. But what if it wasn't just those wise beings that were the light workers, but we all have the ability to have that potential? What many people don't understand is that we do have that ability, not just some of us, but all of us. So this is coming back to my crazy ideas from a few years ago. I thought that what if the sun is actually full of knowledge, and it's beaming that information, that knowledge out into our solar system to enable that information, that knowledge to be shared and improved upon. So if we go back to my radio analogy, if the sun is light and we're light, we have the ability to be the transmitter and the receiver. So what determines whether we receive the information or not? And that's simply down to our own frequency or vibration. So if you can imagine, the sun beams out light as far as it can. We receive that information and then have the ability to beam it out even further. A little bit like pylons, electricity pylons. They receive the information, then it takes it onto the next pylon and so on and so forth. And we receive that information, it has the ability to, like I say, beam it out further. So what's that got to do with personal development? Now, back last year, I was studying some work of Dr. John Demartini. I was studying his work in more depth than I ever had before. And he has a particular method known as the Demartini method. I believe it's one of the most advanced personal development tools and ways of thinking on the planet. And at the heart of it, he talks about being and living in a state of gratitude, which is unconditional love. And that is the balance of perceived support and challenge, benefit and drawback, gain and loss, like and dislike, positive and negative. And when I refer to gratitude as unconditional love, what I mean is there's no judgment. So if we go back to science and we see how gratitude or unconditional love is light, and you feeling it enables you to emit and receive it. So a quantum light wave is comprised of peaks and troughs, or positives and negative phases. The positive phase of light waves are called positrons, the negative called electrons. And on their own, neither of them are light. But when they're joined together in perfect balance, they produce light. And you have exactly the same. You have peaks and troughs that you refer to as positive and negative emotions. Now, memory is emotionally created, which is why whenever you remember anything, you'll remember the highs and the lows. You won't remember things that are just at balance. And that's dominated by the lows in the form of guilt. Now, the future is created by imagination and is also emotionally created, which is why you think of the highs and lows of your future, things you look forward to or the things that you're fearful of. Obviously, the lows show up in the form of fear. Now, when you bring those into balance, not only do you feel gratitude, obviously unconditional love, which is a feeling of peace and calmness and poise, but most importantly, you emit more light. So you attract more of what you desire and you beam out your light further into the universe for other receivers, quote unquote, to be able to benefit from. So if you've been listening to my podcast, you all know that I talk about having a North Star, which many of you know is the brightest star that's out there. And what I never realized until I sort of put this theory to paper was that in order to achieve your North Star, you must learn to embrace the positive and the negative, the pain and pleasure, the benefits and the drawbacks, which takes us to a place of true gratitude, of unconditional love. Now, for as long as you have a lopsided ideal, you'll never be able to shine, quote unquote, as brightly as what's possible for you. So, in summary, the sun transmits light and you're able to receive that information when you are your brightest, which is when you're in a state of gratitude or unconditional love, which is your highest vibration. And there's a fantastic author called Dr. David Hawkins, who's got a book called Power versus Force and a few others, but he refers to it as the map of consciousness. And the highest state is enlightenment, which is the highest vibration. And if we go back to the 4 questions I was talking about at the beginning of the podcast, which is how this theory might help identify a few things. So who are we? Well, knowing what you now know, and look at the prophet definition again, is a prophet is an individual who is regarded as being in contact with a divine being, maybe light, and is said to speak on that identity's behalf, serving as an intermediary between humanity by delivering messages or teachings from the supernatural source, i.e. light, to other people. So maybe we're all potential messengers with the ability, although most never realise how to actually use it, to receive and share that information or knowledge or consciousness or intelligence, whatever you want to label it as. Now, where have we come from? Now, maybe we've come from light years away and we've manifested ourselves with the knowledge, information, consciousness, intelligence that we have been able to receive so far, and we continue to transmit that knowledge, information, consciousness, intelligence into the depth of the ever-expanding universe. Why are we here? Well, maybe that's to receive information and enable that information to continue to stretch into the universe, therefore the universe continue to expand. And where are we going? Well, if we, or the universe, is the living, breathing organism moving through space and time, maybe we're not going to a destination, but simply enabling that knowledge or information, consciousness, intelligence to survive and develop. So that's just my theory of light. I know it's quite a deep one, and it's one that you might have to listen to a couple of times to get your head around. But I hope this is maybe considered or encourage you to consider a different perspective to one that you've considered before. And of course, I'm open to any questions or opinions that you have, or anything you agree or disagree on with this, because with your input, maybe it can help us to refine this further. You might have something that completely debunks anything that I've spoken about, but I'm definitely interested in your opinion. So as always, please join the Make It Happen community. And if you've got anything, feel free to tag me in it on Facebook with anything we've spoken about. So I'd love to hear what you think. I hope you found this useful. Please let me know. Until next time, make it happen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.